In each of these styles of dining, the service is so important. And I think when you're considering who to partner with for your culinary, whether it's included in your venue or whether you're bringing in an outside caterer, I think it's so important to ask about the service and also ask your planner about service to make sure that your vision for the style of food is also going to match with the style of service.
Live your life within the moment, and don't go wait until the morning.
Welcome to The Wedding Plan. My name is Tyler Spire, and me and my team produce bespoke events across the globe. This podcast is where I share key advice for planning your own wedding, as well as behind-the-scenes adventures and stories from the events we produce. Hey friends, and welcome to The Wedding Plan. Today, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite parts of the entire wedding. And no, it's not the decor, it's food and beverage. Having delicious food, really fun items at the bar can really elevate the entire experience. And notice I said delicious, not necessarily gourmet. You know, I love a good gourmet plated meal and all the unique things. And when I'm invited somewhere and I get to taste something really unique, it's always really memorable and fun, especially if it's fantastic. But also some of my favorite weddings I've been to have just had delicious, maybe it's barbecue or food trucks or whatever it is. And I walk away going, wow, that was so yummy. So amazing food, amazing beverage really can make or break an event. And I think it's also important to remember that the food is just part of it. And we've kind of been talking about this with other vendors, right? Like the service they provide, the item that they're providing for you is important, but then their service, their attitude, the way they work is equally as important. And it is not any different with food and beverage. In fact, I would even argue that service from a food and beverage perspective is more important than the food itself. I'm going to say that again. Service from a food and beverage perspective can even be more important than the food itself. Think about it this way. If you are sitting down to dinner at a beautiful Michelin restaurant and you order some amazing things and you're excited to try everything and your food takes a long time to come out. When it comes out, it's cold. Maybe you ask the server for something and they forget to bring it to you. Maybe your water glass is constantly empty. Maybe you're waiting or you're flagging down someone to try and get more wine. Whatever it is, even if the food is amazing, you will walk away and be like, wow, that was a terrible experience. And vice versa, if you're at a more casual restaurant and maybe the food you are eating isn't the best you've ever had, but it's good and you're enjoying it and it's, tastes good and you're having fun with people you love and they're on it. Your server is smiling. They are attentive. Your water glass is constantly full. When a dish is dirty, it is taken away. Your food comes out piping hot. It's delicious. You have a question about the menu. They know exactly what they're talking about. They bring out, all the courses, all the things right away in a good way. And we end with a smile. You will walk away being like, that was a really great dinner. And again, you might not walk away being like, it's the best food I've had in my life, but you would walk away from the experience being like, wow, that was really positive. And if you've had the best food and you have really terrible service, you'd walk away being like, wow, I can't believe the service was just terrible. You would walk away with that. So at a wedding, it's no different. And making sure whoever you're bringing on for food and beverage has good food, but also amazing service, I think is so important. So let's start by talking about food and different styles of dining. And then let's talk about how those styles impact service. And then we'll go forward from there. So when I'm working with a client, I like to explain that there's basically 4 types of dining experiences at an event. Now, if you're an event planner and you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I can think of a bunch more. I agree. There's different hybrids and things you can do, but it's helpful to think about 4 main types. One would be sort of your traditional plated meal. This is when you are seated at your table and a server comes around and brings you your salad that is plated or your meal that is plated. Your food is being brought to you, presented on a plate. 2 would be a buffet style of service where you are getting up from your table. You are walking to the buffet and you are getting your plate at the buffet and you are then filling it, or servers are filling it for you, with items that you would like. And then you return to your table and sit down. The third would be family style dining. This is when you are seated at the table, your plate is on the table, and instead of a fully loaded plate coming out from the kitchen, servers come to your table with platters and bowls and other things full of food, and very much like around your family dinner table, your Thanksgiving table, or whatever it is, you get the platters and bowls, you use the serving spoon, and you dish yourself up what you would like. You pass the platter to the next person at the table. And it's a very familial, kind of enjoyable style of dining. Finally, there are food station kind of styles of dining. And now I like to explain to couples, food stations are often basically just a buffet, but broken up into lots of different parts. But food stations are typically smaller buffets or chef-manned stations that are around usually the perimeter of the room. There's usually different kinds of food, and usually there's smaller plates at each station. So at this style of reception, you might go and maybe there's a taco station. You get some tacos, and there's like all the fun things with that. And then over on the other side, there's a paella station, and then maybe there's a tapas station, and then there's a farmer's market salad station. And that style of dining, typically you're getting smaller plates, dishing up little things, and getting to try a bunch of different items. And that is also really fun. Finally, I think it's important to mention that a lot of these styles of dining can be combined in different ways. For example, sometimes when we have a couple that wants to do food stations, for example, we want to start the evening with a plated salad. So maybe everyone sits down, they get a plated salad, maybe there's bread service, wine service, whatever it is, and then tables are dismissed to go to the food stations or buffet or something else. So that would be a hybrid. Or maybe there's a plated salad followed by a family style dinner, things like that. And depending on the style of dining, depending on the food you're serving, what your chef is recommending, what your planner is recommending, there's lots of creative ways to do it. I also get asked a lot about like food trucks or less traditional styles of dining. And again, like if you have a food truck and it's one food truck, that's very similar to a buffet, right? Like it's set up, and yes, it's not out on a table, but it's a truck serving the food. People are going up and getting their food. If you have a bunch of different food trucks, that's more similar to like a food station style of dining. So there's lots of creative things, and I love seeing creativity in this realm of weddings and couples choosing what works for them, what makes them excited, what tells their story, and also what fits within their budget. So pros and cons of the different types of dining. I love and almost always recommend a plated meal. If it's done right and there's good service, a plated meal means that everyone has a seat. When you do a plated meal, you need to assign everyone a seat, because typically with a plated meal, your guests are going to pre-select their entrees when they RSVP in your invitation. They're going to say, I'm having the beef, I'm having the fish, I request a vegetarian menu, whatever that is. So in your seating chart, you're going to know what each person is eating at a plated meal. So you are going to assign them their seat. And pro tip, we always have our menus printed with only the entree they selected. So if my wife and I are invited to a wedding and she orders the beef and I order the fish, when I sit down at my place, it should say Tyler Spire, and then it should only show the fish entree. At my wife's place, it would say Taylor Spire and only show the beef entree. And that way, when I sit down as a guest, I RSVP'd a couple months ago. I'm probably not even going to remember what I RSVP'd for, and it's very clear that this is the meal that's coming to me. I think a common mistake people make with a plated meal is they'll print all three menu options. And then when the guests sit down, they're like, "Ooh, but I'm looking at the sides on the fish, and that looks way better than what I selected. So I think I want to switch to that." And some catering teams and some institutions can really easily handle those switches. But often, more often than not, when you have 200 people, you have all the plating lines, and you have everything going. You're trying to get things out quickly. All those changes, if a lot of people are making changes, can really throw off the timing of dinner. And timing is everything. You have a very finite amount of time to produce this event. And if we get caught up in dinner with an extra 30, 40 minutes of service, that's time we've lost dancing and doing all the other fun things. So we love plated. We love when everyone's assigned a seat. We love when there's good service. It's simple. It's easy. And in some places, some venues that we love will actually do tableside ordering, where they'll come to each guest and ask them what they would like. And then in that case, I think listing all the different entree types is important, because then people are given that choice. In plated meals, there's also a duet option that we see, especially at like much larger weddings, where everyone is served the same thing, but maybe it's like beef and fish, or whatever combination it is, that's where the word duet comes from, but where everyone is served the exact same thing. And in that case, you don't need different printed menus or different things like that. Service usually goes really fast. The only plates that are coming out different are ones that are modified for allergies or ones like for someone who's a vegetarian. Otherwise, everything's coming out the same for everybody. So plated meal, we love it. Everybody has a sense of place. You're seated at your table. Everything is brought to you. It's very elegant. And 9 out of 10 times, this is what we do for our weddings, because we find that the guests are most comfortable when they have a sense of place. They know where they're supposed to be. We feel like nice and in control. We know what entrees are going to what table. We know what dietary restrictions are there. Our team is meticulous about color coding those seating charts and just making sure we know exactly what needs to go to each table and that our culinary partner knows that as well. So that's the plated meal. Then we have the buffet. This is a lot more casual style of dining, but to be quite honest, we also see our clients doing this, especially at much larger weddings and for specific kinds of food. For example, Indian food often is presented very well in a buffet. It can be plated, absolutely, but when we're doing a big Indian wedding, often with all the sauces and things and just all the deliciousness, a buffet makes more sense. So buffets, what I like about a buffet is people can get exactly what they want. I find that there's less food waste because if someone's served a plated meal and say there's something on that plate they don't like, they're just going to leave it. And then that's going to go, to compost or go back to the kitchen. But if at a buffet, you just get what you want as you go. I think one of the most important things with a buffet is you need to make sure you have an abundance of food, because what will happen is some people will dish up more of something, some people will dish up less of something, and you just want to make sure you have plenty so that you're not running out of anything and that there's that sense of abundance. Also with a buffet, we want to make sure from a service perspective that there's not a big holdup. You want to make sure that you have enough buffets. We usually say 1 buffet per 50 people, and we love our buffets to be double-sided. So if we have a really large wedding, we'll sometimes have up to 6 buffets. We like to keep things moving fast because, again, we don't want to lose that time later in the evening. And then a double-sided buffet, I often count as 2. So, and then sometimes with the buffet, you can have servers actually serving the food. Sometimes people are serving themselves. Again, with your culinary partner, you just want to ask about that and figure out what's right for you. Next up, we have family style. I like family style, especially for a rehearsal dinner or a more casual event. A lot of people have told me like, ooh, I really want to do family style. I think it's going to save me some money. And friends, it doesn't save you any money. In fact, I think it's the most expensive style of dining, because with family style, your guests sit down and you have to rent all of the platters and things that serve the food, in addition to all the plates, forks, glassware, things that you would need at a plated meal. And you need the same number of servers that you would need at a plated meal in order to make a family style, service go smoothly. So you're paying for more rentals and often more food because we also need an abundance of food at the table. Finally, one of the other cons to family style, in my opinion, is you have to shrink the centerpieces. There has to be room on the table for all of these platters and things so that your guests aren't feeling cluttered, and platters, it's not feeling crowded and uncomfortable. So I, again, love family style for rehearsal dinners or for a more casual wedding. I think if it's done well, smaller flowers, smaller candles, really beautiful platters, it can feel very farm to table, very familial. Love all of that. But it's just important to remember that it's not a decision you make to save money. In fact, it's an investment for a very intentional service experience. One other thing that kind of comes up in the event world is the idea of like French family style. And that is where the servers come out and the server's holding the platter and the server dishes you up from the platter right onto your plate. If we're doing a more elegant wedding and we have a couple that really wants that family style level of service, we will often do more of a French family style situation, just since people, especially if they're in black tie or it's more formal, kind of passing platters of food can sometimes feel a little uncomfortable in that kind of attire. So important to know. Finally, we have food station style of service. This is especially popular at weddings where maybe there's not going to be traditional seating where everyone's sitting at a table, maybe where you have some lounges and some high tops and some booths and maybe some tables and all sorts of different kinds of seating. And you want your wedding to feel a little more like a cocktail reception where the focus is a little more around dancing. Now, granted, we've done food stations for weddings where everybody has a seat at the table. Again, you can kind of pull hybrids on all of these things, but we see food stations the most when people want a little bit less traditional of a reception. I love food stations. I think that they can be done really well. I love a small plate menu. Personally, as a guest, I love a station because I can go up and try all the different things. I think the key with food stations is you want to make sure you have enough of them. You want to make sure you have plenty of small plates because the idea is someone's going to get, try something and then they'll get rid of that plate and then get the next thing at the next station. And you want to make sure you have enough seating. We tell all of our couples, no matter what style of seating you have, whether it's tables and chairs, whether it's lounges, you need to have, if you are serving a meal, you need to have a seat and a surface per person. So that people have a place to put their plates, cut their meat with their knife, whatever it is. If people don't have that, they start to feel uncomfortable and you're kind of trying to balance things. And so if there's not a seat or a surface per person, you just want to kind of go to more of like a cocktail style reception where there's not a meal. It's just past appetizers and drinks and things like that. In each of these styles of dining, the service is so important. And I think when you're considering who to partner with for your culinary, whether it's included in your venue or whether you're bringing in an outside caterer, I think it's so important to ask about the service and also ask your planner about service to make sure that your vision for the style of food is also going to match with the style of service. One of the first things I do when I look at a catering proposal is I go read the number of servers based on that kind of proposal. And especially if it's a caterer I haven't worked with before or a venue I haven't worked at before, that's one of my first questions. How many servers are you assigning? With a plated meal, at a minimum, you need one server per table, in my opinion. There will be some caterers that tell you need more. There will be some that tell you need less. And I always ask the professionals. I always say, hey, well, in your company, what works best? But if I see a 200-person wedding and 10 servers on the order, that is not enough for a plated meal, and we need to double that amount of service. I often get clients that will get their bid back and they'll be like, wow, the line item for service is so high. And we often tell them that is the very last place you want to cut. Because let me tell you, you cut a few servers, dinner goes way longer, and then all that money you spent on that special band or that special DJ, all that money you spent on the venue for this big party is going to get sucked in to delayed meal service. So with a plated meal, having the right number of servers is so important. Another tip with a plated meal is everybody loves to have, their tables fully set with all the china and all the beautiful things. I have a pro tip here. In order for service to go quickly, as a planner, I want all of the plates that chef is using in the kitchen before the guests arrive. A charger on the table is the plate that sort of holds the placeholder for the place setting, and that absolutely can live on the table. But if you want to have the charger, the dinner plate, the salad plate, all the things on the table, we often tell our couples, rent a separate set. Because by time your servers go all around and clear every plate, bring it to the kitchen, and then chef starts plating, we've now delayed service again. And again, you have a finite amount of time for this event. So unless it's a really intimate event, we say just rent double or just do the charger on the table. And I think that that's really important because, again, service matters. The amount of time it takes from when you sit down to when the food comes out matters. With a buffet style of dining, it's often the least expensive because you have the food all in one place, and often you can get away with less servers. We usually say one server per 2 tables at a minimum for buffet. I usually like to pat on more servers onto our weddings, but that is something to keep in mind and is often the least expensive style of dining because the server's responsibility with a buffet is they're replenishing waters, they're clearing dirty plates, they are replenishing the food at the buffet, but they're not coming around and, handing each meal and all the things like that. So I think that's important. And then with a family style level of service, I kind of touched on this already. You need the same amount of servers as a plated meal, and you need the rentals and the platters and all of that. And then finally with food stations, similar level of servers to a buffet. I like to say like a few more just because there's more small plates and more things that need to be cleared. But it's usually a little different than a buffet in that there's a chef often at the food station kind of replenishing and doing their things as they're going. So there's more staff on the floor just doing different things. So as you are thinking about the kind of service you want at your wedding, I think it's really important to make sure you have the food you want and the food that works in your budget. And I think it's as important to have delicious food as it is to have amazing service. My last thing I'll say about food and beverage is in the planning process, depending on your venue, some venues include food and beverage, hotels, country clubs, restaurants, places. So when you're picking the venue, you're also picking the kitchen. And then there's some venues where it's a full build out, private estates, a ranch, a vineyard, whatever it is, where you pick the venue and then you pick a separate partner to be your catering partner. And so I think it's important. I think that either direction can be great, but I think it's important to know that as you're walking into your venue contract and understand, what am I committing to in terms of food and beverage when I'm signing that contract? And if food and beverage isn't included, I always like to ask the venue, who are your favorite caterers? Who are the ones that know this venue so well that you bring back time and time again? Because when a caterer is coming in, there's going to be a kitchen that's built. There's going to be all these things that need to be known about the venue. And while I'm always a fan of trying someone new and bringing someone new in, especially if they're really fantastic, I like to know from the beginning, who do you love to work with from the venue's perspective, and why, so that we can, at least start with those people and see if they're the right fit. In the next episode, we're going to start talking about the bar and all things bar related. And we're also going to touch on desserts. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Live your life within the moment. And don't go wait until the morning. You never know when it is over. All that I know is we'll get older. So let us dance this night away.